Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. My name is Alec Cooley. I'm a senior advisor here with Busch Systems, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's program. This is our latest installment of our Green Thinking webinar series. If we could actually go back real quick. This is the first of today's program is part of our Green Thinking webinar series that Busch Systems does. All these come back in some manner or form to waste reduction, recycling, waste prevention, zero waste topics in general for different sectors. And today's program, as you can see from the title here, is focused on designing waste audits to get useful insights. So to set the stage for today's program, I guess I'll start with sort of the truism that you can't improve what you can't measure. And audits or waste composition studies that dig into the waste generated in a facility or community are one of those essential ways that we can get insights that help us to plan diversion and waste reduction efforts. Waste audits, of course, come in all shapes and sizes. They can be as simple as having your staff making notes from visual scans of trash bins as they're emptied, or they can be as involved in it involves significant effort with significant effort and cost to capture very granular information from each collection stream within a large community. Regardless of the scale that you're working on, audits by themselves simply produce data. For that data to reveal insights that can meaningfully inform program decisions depends on how the methodology and the scope were defined relative to the unique needs and goals of the program. So that's really going to be the focus of today's webinar. Is not so much the nuts and bolts aspects of how you plan and the equipment and all that you need to do waste audits, but it's more on how do you design them so that you're going to get meaningful information on the back end. And if we can go to the next slide. So I'm excited to have three excellent presenters today. I'm going to be joined. First, we're going to hear from Laura Johnson, who is a senior project professional with SCS Engineers, and her colleague Michelle Leonard, who is a senior vice president also with SCS Engineers. And they're going to be giving us sort of a broader best practices, general overview about how to approach this aspect of waste audits. And then following their presentation, we're going to hear from Eric Meliton, who is the manager with the Sustainability Office at Wilfrid Laurier University in Ontario, Canada, to give us more of a case study locally about how they're using waste audits data to inform programs with the university for the diversion and waste prevention. So we look forward to hearing from them in just a moment. If I can go to the next slide. At the very end of the program, I'm going to invite my colleague, Michelle Dunn, who is with our sales team. And for those of you who are not familiar with Busch Systems, we are a manufacturer and sell fine recycling and waste bins. We like to keep a firewall between that aspect and these programs, but I do invite folks who want to stick around at the end. Michelle will be available to show a little bit about some of our products and answer questions that folks might have. So keep that in mind as we get towards the end of the program. I expect this program to be somewhere in the 60 to 70 minute range, just to keep that in mind. If we can go to the next slide. But I will note that throughout this program, we are recording this. We will have the recording and the slides deck will both be archived on our website in the next day or two, and we'll be sending out a note to anybody who registered. So if you're not able to stick around for the whole program or you want to share it with colleagues, just know that you'll be getting that link in the next day or so. We encourage folks to make this as interactive as possible given the webinar format. So I'll point out in your dashboard that the Q&A function, if you have a question that you would actually like the speakers to address or respond to, please type that into the Q&A. I'll be curating those at the end of the program. We'll go through all of those. If you just have comments, you want to riff off of a point that one of the speakers made, you have your own example, something that you've done with waste audits at your facility that you want to share, absolutely encourage sharing those. Just make a note to use the chat function so we can keep those separately. That helps me to know, to find the questions that we'll pull out for the speakers themselves. And next slide. And with that, let me hand it over to Laura Johnson and Michelle Leonard, again with SCS Engineers, so we can hear more about some of the work they do and some of the best practices that they have to share with us. Welcome, Michelle.
Thanks so much, Alec. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Laura and I are really happy to be participating in the webinar today. SCS Engineers, we're an environmental consulting firm headquartered in Long Beach, California, with offices across the country. And part of the work that we do is to conduct waste audits for cities and counties and private sector to identify the types and quantities of waste that are being disposed and recycled and otherwise captured from the waste stream. I'm going to, oh, here we go. So we're going to talk about why you do a waste audit and how you decide how to design the study. We'll present some information on some case studies of projects that we worked on. And really the intent is what to do with the information that you gather from a waste audit or a waste characterization study. So initially, why do you even want to do a waste audit? Well, there's a number of reasons why municipalities and haulers and processors conduct these studies. One is to identify, what's presently being disposed, and then to use that information to target various materials for recycling or processing, and also to identify who's generating that material. Is it your single family or multifamily or commercial or industrial sector? The information is also often used to establish metrics, so you can evaluate the effectiveness of your programs. So you want to identify your baseline, and then as you implement programs, continuously conduct these studies so you can measure your progress. One of the important aspects that we've been conducting studies for recently is to really target what can we divert and recover from the disposed waste stream, whether it's the traditional recyclables or maybe some of those hard to recyclable materials, or of course a big emphasis right now is organics, and what types of organics can we recover from the waste stream and put to a higher and better use. For many of the studies, we've also been tasked with identifying or calculating what are some of the environmental benefits that result from diverting these materials from the landfills. And we'll show you some examples of that, as well as the potential revenue from the capture of those materials and even the potential for job creation. A number of studies that we've conducted have also been used for designing facilities, whether it's a waste transfer or processing facility or an energy recovery facility. And so looking at the types and quantities of materials that will be managed in those facilities and what's the potential energy that may be generated by diverting those materials into an energy, waste energy facility. One of the first steps in doing a study is to decide, what kind of a study do we need to do? And we've grouped these into, two different types of studies. One is the physical type of study, and the other is visual. So in a physical study, these are probably the ones you may be most familiar with. And this is when we literally sort the waste, the materials into individual categories and components, and then weigh each one separately. So we would have a category of paper, and then the components would be cardboard and writing paper, newspaper, OCC, etc. We oftentimes, the number of categories and components can number in the high hundreds. Really depends on the type of study and what you're trying to find out. And as you can see in the picture on the top, this involves a sort crew standing around a table, and each one assigned to a different material type. And then each category is weighed separately in comparison to the total sample size. Typically, those physical sorts, the sample size will be 200 pounds. That's in relation to the ASTM standard that typically calls for a 200-pound sample. Now, on the visual samples, these are typically used for construction and demolition debris, where these are big, bulky, heavy materials. And so utilizing a 200-pound sample, that could just be one item in that sample, whether it's a chunk of concrete or asphalt or a refrigerator. So in that case, we do a visual sample where we will walk around the load and we will visually estimate the percentages of each waste type that makes up that load and assign a percentage to that material type. And again, those are typically used for construction and demolition debris or self-haul type loads. So when you're initially designing your study, there's some key considerations. Probably the most important one is to define your objectives for the study. What information do you want to get out of this study, and what is the information going to be used for? It could be used to identify the existing types and quantities of disposal, but it also may be used to identify is there contamination in the recycling stream? Is there contamination in the organic stream? For many jurisdictions, particularly here in California and others, there are regulatory requirements to conduct waste characterization studies. And so I want to make sure that your study aligns with your objectives and any requirements. Then the next step is to identify the waste streams and the sectors. So choosing those material categories is really important so that you get the information that you need for further planning purposes. And also when you're looking at your generators, do you want to identify residential, and do you want to break that down into single family or multifamily? For your commercial sector, are you just going to do commercial in general, or do you want to try to capture different generators, whether it's restaurants or hotels or office buildings, etc.? And again, these are aligned with what are your objectives for the study, what will you be using that data for? Another critical component is the sampling and site selection. So you want to make sure that you get samples from representative facilities in your region. And so those could include landfills or transfer stations or material processing facilities. But you want to get a statistically sound sampling from each of those so you represent the entire region that you're sampling for, whether it's a city or a county, or in some cases, we've even done these on a statewide basis. And then also you want to take into account seasonal variations. Some parts of the country, seasons matter. Other parts of the country, they don't. But you want to make sure that you take that into account. Also, even things like holidays. We typically try to avoid Christmas and Thanksgiving and other holidays that may impact the types and quantities of waste that's disposed. And also in terms of operational variations, probably not a good idea to sample on a really snowy day or a rainy day when your samples may get skewed in terms of the weight. And then finally, the methodology, as I explained in the previous slide, we do it either physical or visual characterizations, or sometimes a hybrid method where we will physically sort the residential and commercial waste streams, and then we'll visually sample the construction and demolition. Each has kind of a trade-off in terms of their accuracy and cost and operational feasibility. But again, you want to make sure you're doing your study to get the data that you need for your future planning, whether it's in terms of mandates for diversion or laws and regulations related to your location. We're want to present some case studies of some of the studies that we've done. This one for the state of Iowa, and SES has actually done a series of statewide studies for Iowa. Many states are conducting them on an ongoing basis, again, so they can establish some trends in terms of disposal and diversion and opportunities. And so that data is really important to be able to have to compare if your programs are being effective. The most recent study that we did in Iowa in 2022 included a little over 500 samples, and we went to a wide range of facilities in Iowa to gather that information, including landfills and transfer stations. We used the standard ASTM method, which again includes 200-pound samples typically, and we sorted that into 84 different categories. And I believe we'll be providing a link to you later in the webinar to that study, which is available on the Iowa DNR website, where you can dive into more of the details. We did a detailed analysis of residential as well as the industrial and commercial waste streams. Some of the key findings were organics and paper were really the dominant material categories, each at about 22%, plastics at 15%, and then within the organics fraction, food waste was the largest component at 19%. For this study, we also conducted some economic and environmental benefits analysis, and I'll go into a little bit of detail on those as well. So this information shows you that in terms of the disposal that we identified in Iowa, it was about 0.43 tons or 0.43 tons of waste disposed per person. If the materials that were identified as potentially recyclable or compostable or recyclable, if they were captured from the disposed waste stream, it would result in a 48% reduction in disposal, which then could be translated into CO2 emissions reduced as well. When you expand that out to, say, a 4-person household, you can see what the potential again is for if those materials were captured, reducing tonnage and the CO2 emissions as well. And then what we often do is look at, if those materials were recycled or the organics were composted, what the CO2 emissions would be on a total basis for the state, and then even calculated if we did capture that information, it would be equivalent to powering about 42% of Iowa's homes for 1 year. And then the bottom chart shows you the breakdown by material type of the greenhouse gas emission reductions from capturing those materials or diverting those materials from the landfill. And then in terms of using the data for job creation, we know that recycling has about a 10 times more job creation than landfilling. So using that information, again, if the materials that were being disposed were recycled, it could create almost 9,000 jobs compared to the baseline where those materials are disposed. Similarly, if those materials were reused or recycled, it would create reuse and remanufacturing jobs of almost 11,000. And this data is important as the state moves forward to identify where the emphasis should be on future programs in terms of the types and quantities of materials that could be diverted and what that might mean in terms of job creation, economic development in the state. I'm going to hand over the webinar now to my colleague Laura Johnson, who's going to present a couple other case studies from some projects that SES has worked on.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. So the next few case studies that I'll be presenting on are a bit different from the Iowa statewide study and involved a bit more of a localized effort in some of these areas. So the first one I do want to touch on is a county here in California, where their kind of primary objective that they wanted to focus on was specific to their county facilities. And they really wanted to kind of walk the talk, if you will, of they're the ones, educating everyone on how to do proper sorting, but they wanted to see how they were performing as well and kind of benchmark and see how they were performing against their zero waste implementation plan, which set zero waste goals for themselves of further county facilities reaching zero waste by 2030. So for us to be able to do this, we went ahead and conducted kind of a dual effort that was both a physical and visual waste characterization at the county facilities. And I believe we did roughly 18 county facilities out of their 81 that we had identified. And we had done this through grouping of each of their facilities into 7 major types. And I'll kind of dive into that here a little bit further. But kind of the main things that stood out to us through this study was that organics continues to be one of the most prevalent material types in the landfill waste stream. And here in California, SB 1383 has been a big focus for all of our jurisdictions, and trying to get that organic waste out of the landfill still remains a priority. But some other materials that we found that were still prevalent included paper and metal, and roughly 2/3 of the waste stream could potentially have been diverted. And so this was kind of a big eye opener for the county to identify, there's some improvements that they could make internally. Let's see on the next slide. See if it'll move for me. Okay, here we go. So the methodology that we implemented here was that after I had identified the 18 facilities that we were going to be visiting, we established kind of a schedule for a 1-week period and had 2 teams of 2 that had mobilized to each of those facilities. And at each of those visits, what we did was interview some of the key personnel, and that included folks like operation managers, janitorial staff, and did a walkthrough of the interior conditions to identify what their infrastructure looked like, their waste generating points, what are the main things that we're going to be seeing on the back end, and potentially identifying areas that we could implement diversion programs that could help. So after we do our internal walkthrough, we then on the outside are collecting that 200-pound sample that Michelle had mentioned and sorting that into, for this specific county, we did 38 material categories. And once we've sorted that, we weigh everything out and then immediately go into doing a visual characterization of the recycling and organics waste streams. And the intent of doing that was to identify their fill levels, as well as any contaminants that may be in those waste streams. So not only are we trying to divert material out of the landfill into those streams, but we want to make sure that it's not already having some sort of contamination that needs to be addressed along with this action plan. So once we did that, we were able to collect some data, and we broke it out into those 7 facility types that I had mentioned. So airport, animal shelter, maintenance yards, any detention centers, offices, recreation and parks, and some veteran memorial buildings. And you can see here, it's kind of small, but it is a highly variable waste profile that we were seeing as we moved between facilities. And so this really allows the county to come in and see how they can tailor their outreach and implementation programs specific to each of their facilities. So one program that they're going to have available for the animal shelter that's going to address the 56% of organics that you're seeing there is not going to be the same as the implementation that they're going to give to their offices, that the highest waste stream there is paper, which is no shock, I think, for those of us in offices. So that's one thing that they were able to see and was a really big red flag, that you can see some of these areas that you can really dive into and start implementing your programs based on that. And using that material composition, we like to pair it with a diversion assessment. And so that's where we've taken each of those 38 material categories and assigned them into one of 4 categories, whether it's divertible, compostable, potentially divertible, or other. And that can really help folks dive into where should be their priority. And so for looking at this county, the animal shelter having almost 80% of their material could potentially have been diverted or composted was a major area that we called out to the county and had some implementation plans for them on how they could improve the infrastructure internally and externally to be able to divert some of that really valuable material stream into the right area. Same thing goes for, let's see here, the maintenance yard. You can see they're at almost 60% of divertible material, and that was largely coming from scrap metal that they were pulling from each of their different maintenance yards, or as they're repairing items, that's ending up into a roll-off container and was being disposed of rather than diverted. So this is just kind of a way that you can look at your data. I always like to compare the material composition with that assessment to really get a good glance at what you can focus on. Okay, so for our next case study, we conducted a comprehensive waste audit for the city of Davis. And so this one was a little bit different in that we weren't focusing on necessarily the composition of the materials within the bin, but we were actually looking at a separate issue that for the downtown business area, they were having space constraints. And so I'm sure many folks that are with cities are seeing this as you continue to grow, that space is the same. And as you add more and more containers and businesses, you're having additional issues that come with it. And so we were brought in to do an assessment of the downtown core area. And what we did was inspected 192 downtown businesses. And what that looks like is we came in and utilized a mobile application to take a visual look at all of the containers on the backside, collected the information on what waste services are on the ground, compared that to what the hauler had in their files. We're looking at container fullness. We're interviewing some of the business owners to really understand qualitatively what are their frustrations and issues that they're facing with their waste streams and space constraints potentially, and then taking that information and providing an implementation plan to the city. And some kind of the high level things that we noticed from our field work were the high waste food generators. I think it's no surprise to anybody that fast food, the full service restaurants, some movie theaters and coffee shops were of the highest generation within the city. And so they were going to be the ones that we were going to focus a lot of this implementation towards. And similarly, the city, I guess to add to the context of this, they have 5 waste streams available to their businesses to utilize. And so the space becomes very limited, and recycling was one that continues to be a high volume that's being generated, but the way that it was being collected varied against different businesses. The hauler allowed for cardboard to be stacked up to be collected and did not need to be in a container. And so that presented some issues safety-wise. If it was stacked in the public right-of-ways, in alleyways, it's taking up additional space. So this was another area that we wanted to focus on and that we captured through our site walks as we went through the entire downtown core area. And ultimately, the data that we were capturing is informing a very detailed implementation plan that I'll kind of go on to a little bit more, but it's allowing the city to create a plan for their waste management structure moving forward, and it's based on what their current conditions are. So I did want to share a little bit of the tool that we utilized in the field. So we used ArcGIS, a mapping tool, which allowed us to upload a lot of the data that we were able to capture ahead of time into one application. So things like the boundary lines for the downtown core area, parcel sizing, building allocations, the owners, bills, business licenses, and then any hauler provided data, we were all able to upload that into one source. And then our field team was able to access this in real time and collect information on, okay, I can see the hauler says that there's 5 containers on the ground for recycling. I'm really seeing 8. We'll notate that, take some photos, notate any conversations we've had with business management, and that's all stored in one document, which is really great. Okay, so what we were able to do with all of this information that we collected was provide an implementation plan for the city to be able to utilize moving forward, kind of how they can address the current issues with the space constraints and also other kind of identified issues that we encountered in the field, and develop a plan so that as they continue to grow as a city, that they have these areas addressed early on. So one of the main things that we felt would be useful for the city was introducing a 7-day waste collection for restaurants and those high impact generators that we touched on. While we were in the field, we noticed there was high instances of overflow. They were already maxed out on the 6-day collection frequency. And so we had implemented this recommendation to add a 7th day of collection for some of these larger generators. Additionally, some of the other issues that we saw, I touched on the cardboard recycling. It was being stockpiled in public right-of-ways, those alleyways. It becomes a safety handling issue for the hauler. And so we provided a recommendation of swapping out and implementing a policy saying that all cardboard needs to be containerized for the safety and handling of the hauler, the businesses, and everybody involved. And then these last two, one of our other recommendations was to swap out some of these smaller carts and to implement some larger bins that you can service at a higher frequency and still have a larger amount of capacity servicing each of these businesses to just provide higher efficiencies for the hauler and for operations in general. And then lastly, this standardized public receptacles. During our walkthrough of the downtown area, we identified 8 different versions of a triple station or public receptacles. And so a part of our recommendations were to standardize this across the city so that if someone's going into a coffee shop or whether they're going into a fast food restaurant and they have this takeaway item with them, they have the same process to dispose of that available to them at each corner of the downtown area. All right. So that was just a few of our case studies, and I hope that you all are kind of in this mindset thinking of, okay, what can I do? Maybe you are already implementing a waste audit and you have a bunch of data. Now, what do you need to do? So there's a lot of great things you can do with this information, and I encourage you to kind of let the data lead you a bit. You can find those hot spots and red flags that you can really drill into, whether that's going to be targeted education and outreach to those generators that you sampled from to really make sure that you can get that behavior change that's going to be lasting for them. Or if you're doing a full system redesign that requires infrastructure changes, that is something that can be really spotlighted by this data that you've collected. And even policy changes. If you need to, set the foundation already. California has plenty of regulations that are kind of pushing this forward, but for others, if you need to set local ordinances, this data can kind of help you decide what focus areas are going to be priority for your local community. So for that county that we were looking at, organics, again, was one of the highest prevalent materials in the landfill stream. So that was something that they knew they were going to have to focus on and create policies internally as a county for their specific facilities to address those. And then lastly, Michelle touched on this, but being able to take your data and not just say, okay, what is our stream made up of, but what is the larger impact of being able to divert this? Is it going to provide you an economic benefit? It's going to be creating jobs. And to be able to prevent that, or to be able to present that to your stakeholders that may not be as moved by the environmental aspect of it, but you can present these ideas to them as well, can really help get more people involved and invested in these program developments. So yeah, I encourage you all to take this data, to take action. And I know that Alec kind of touched on it, but you can't change what you don't measure. So I'm looking forward to answering any of your questions.
Great. Thank you, Laura and Michelle. Lots of great information there. Last time back, we've had some great some great questions come in through the chat and the Q&A. What I'd like to do is pull up a live poll question first to get some feedback from folks. Then I do have a question or two that I'll toss out your direction as we go along. But first, for everyone, I encourage you to give your input in terms of, there are many reasons or objectives you might have, but just take and say your primary one. What will be your primary objective or purpose for why you would want to do a waste audit? Is it data to address contamination, to improve existing programs, to identify new opportunities? So go ahead and respond there as you wish. And for Laura and Michelle, we've had, as I said, a number of questions come in. A couple of them focused on just defining divertibility. So one was asking, how do you differentiate between divertible and potentially divertible? Do you review local recycling rules? Is it based on market availability, or how do you define those exactly?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way that we've defined those in our study is looking at the local conditions and identifying what is being communicated to residents and businesses that is curbside accepted in their recycling program. So that would be something that we would classify as divertible. Where we move into kind of this potentially divertible is it may not be a recognized program. Say you're working with the county, county-wide, it may be only available via drop-off, or whether it's textiles. And that's a potentially divertible stream in that you could be upcycling those, you could be taking those to donation areas. So those are where we get into the potentially divertible.
Got it. Okay. That ties in a little bit to another couple questions came down to methodology. Ivy was asking, just for clarifying with the standardized methodology you were referring to, that's the ASTM standards, correct? Which I dropped a link into the chat. So for folks who are interested to learn more about that, those are defined standards that you can purchase and use. Maggie made reference, and Laura, I think this might have been a little bit of what you were just touching on, but Maggie was talking about sort of alternative methodologies that look beyond simply the diversion materials, but also looking upstream. So understanding reusable items and other materials in the waste stream that you might look at on for prevention as opposed to diversion. Can you talk a little bit about that opportunity? And I know Maggie also referenced there's some EPA standards, I guess, around that part, but if you could address sort of the upstream part of methodology.
Sure. Yeah, I may not touch exactly on what Meg is referring to, but a part of what we also tend to look at is, either at the early stages or even once you've collected all of your data, it can tell you kind of what prevention methodologies you're looking at. I will say that organics, being that I'm based in California, has been a big focus of ours. And most of our messaging can be focused on, purchasing habits for food planning and making sure that that waste is never created in the first place. As far as how that feeds into your waste audit, it kind of depends on how you set up your waste sector generators that you want to sample from. And I know that that's been a key part of us trying to develop material categories as well, and looking at donatable versus non-donatable kind of material types. By the time they get to us at the transfer station, could this have potentially been reused or prevented?
Okay, great. let's go ahead and we'll just come back to this live poll results. It looks like the responses we got, 28% or so marked down to sort of establishing baseline performance metrics, waste stream profile. Another 22% were focused on contamination, existing diversion, ways of improving existing diversion were the three that stuck to the top. So it's good to know. With this, I'm going to hold the rest of the questions for the moment for the end. Encourage folks to keep adding those into the Q&A for Michelle and Laura, and we will come back to them after we've had a chance to hear from Eric. So if we can close the poll and go to the next slide. Great. Yeah, there we go. Eric Meliton is the manager with this, is a manager with the sustainability office at Wilfrid Laurier University, and so I will hand it over to Eric and let's hear about the work that you guys are doing in Ontario.
Thanks, Alec. I appreciate the team's going to be moving the slides forward for us, and Alec does have a few links that he's going to be sending along as we get prompted during the presentation. If we can move to the next slide, please. We wanted to give a flavor of where waste auditing is utilized at Laurier. Laurier uses a lot of our waste auditing to enhance existing programming. So the next few slides are going to give a background, and then I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the information that I want to share. As part of the introduction, we're going to get a few slides of where our background comes from, where the institution is, and then moving into our zero waste goals at the institution that's been developed since 2008, and then some of the impactful initiatives that have been derived from effective waste auditing. So for those that don't know, and for folks that are either across Canada or the United States, Wilfrid Laurier University is based out of Waterloo, Ontario, which is about 45 minutes southwest of Toronto. We actually have a multi-campus environment. So we have institutions in Brantford, Kitchener, and Meliton, and Waterloo, as well as in Yellowknife. So we are about 19,000 students, more or less, year to year, and quite a diverse set of academic portfolio that is offered. Where did we all begin? So the background was that we started as part of a student referendum back in 2008 as an office to create a sustainability office focused on implementation of sustainability initiatives. Fast forward to 18 years later, our program has evolved from a team of 1 to a team of 3, and full integration across our multiple campuses in trying to work on sustainability. I'm going to take a pause here because Alec's going to send you all the link, but I want to take a pause here to thank our team, our facilities and asset management team, the resident services team, our faculty of science folks, and our athletics folks, as well as the Circular Innovation Council, which invited us to speak on this initiative, because this group is actually why our sustainability office does really well. This is a team effort in order to get effective auditing done properly. Our mission and vision is really to establish a culture of sustainability long-term and to transform Laurier into an institution that actually integrates sustainability practices. Our other priorities is to focus and create and achieve and lead with our students, staff, and faculty, and within our community and within our alumni base as well. So diving into our zero waste goals, our goals were started as part of establishing a policy, 4.13, establishing a sustainability action plan, which Alec is going to share with you, and aligning it with our future readiness strategy as an institution. What compelled me to join Laurier 5 years ago was this aspect of having sustainability embedded in the actual aspect of leadership and some of our strategic goals. Within our policy, we have a scope, purpose, and principles, really to allow us to utilize this as a way to engage our community within and externally to push forward with sustainability initiatives. This has evolved over time to encompass a number of things and will continue to evolve. We leverage this in order to align with our sustainability action plan. So I had the pleasure of writing the last plan from 2023, 2028. And within it, we have a waste goal, which is to reduce our overall amount of waste produced on campus by 5%, and overall diversion by 10%. And essentially right now we're generating about 28 kilograms of landfill waste. But overall, that's a decrease from where we were back in 2009 when our program started. Alec is going to be sending this reference to you as a PDF after the webinar presentation, but we're actually quite proud of renewing our STARS ASHE rating back in November 2025, which showcases Laurier's continued pursuit of a framework in sustainability, which also includes waste management initiatives, which is where we use the auditing capacity to really enhance that. We also want to kind of share, as part of the integration with academics and faculty and staff, we're also pursuing a long-term SDG, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals strategy, which is something that we've been initiating for the last 3 years, and we're quite proud of the fact that it's continuing to grow. So here's where we're diving right in. So I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so to kind of express some of the impactful initiatives that Laurier has utilized waste auditing to really pursue. So as folks in Ontario know, waste auditing for institutions is provincially legislated. So we have to do waste audits on campus. We have to do waste audits as an organization. But also we've also recently had to also report on our recycling initiatives that we have to report on in terms of volumes that impact municipal systems and the collection systems that are in place. That's all the regulatory side, the legislative side about it. But what can we do with that information? You collect this information once or twice a year. What can you actually use that information for? When I started here 5 years ago, I saw waste auditing internally as an opportunity to not only obviously save money on utilizing external consultants or service providers that could do it for us specifically, but also create capacity in-house. So we utilized our membership with Circular Innovation Council to take their waste auditor training, which they offer twice a year. And this is an opportunity for our staff to actually be certified to do the audits internally. What does that give us? Well, in comparison to an external consultant, we're actually able to audit whenever we want. I used to be certified within this program, and we also trained 2 staff members to also be certified at our Brantford campus and our Waterloo campus. And this allows us to have capacity across the portfolio, but also to audit more often. So we've actually been able to triple our audit capacity year to year compared to what we used to do 5 years ago. This allows us to kind of identify short-term and long-term challenges, customize audit capacity that is required to address a particular problem, and to learn some of the internal challenges that we could address. It also allows me and a student, we have our student here supporting one of our staff members, to get firsthand experience and insight from our staff leads on some of the issues that they're experiencing on campus. And that's actually really impactful. Get our hands dirty, so to speak, and be, I guess, embracing the fact that we're trying to learn directly from each other. Where we've used this in practice is that we've used this to enhance some of our engagement opportunities. So we have an existing move out program, which is essentially moving resident students out of residence into going back home over the summertime. They generate a lot of materials that could be diverted. So we're one of the few schools in Ontario that has a permanent free store available for our move out program materials to divert into in Ontario at each campus in Brantford and in Waterloo. So all of this material gets collected. We can divert it away from landfill. That includes textiles, that includes donated clothing, that includes food, unopened food, and household appliances that can be reused. That all material can be captured now and provided to students next year in a retail center that they have access to all year long. The free store itself, as a result of that effort, ends up kind of serving as an inventory management system of what we collect. So typically we collect all this material. Where does it all go? It would normally go in landfill. People would take it home. It might go in landfill over there. Now there's a life cycle that's enhanced for this material. Our initial audits, back when we created the free store about 6 years ago, identified some of the materials that we would typically get. Now, when we do the move out program, we actually are able to audit the volumes that are generated and are actually understanding of how much we can actually donate to the community as donations that we can't retain and use, but also donate to our students who are of need financially and are unable to afford some of these items. The biggest impact that we have about 1,000 Laurier international students that attend Laurier each year. Those are the folks that come here with almost nothing. They have what they can carry in a suitcase. They can collect household items, textiles, and goods that they can use for their living situation for a semester or for a year while they're moving here from another country. What we wanted to highlight from 2025, we're still kind of sorting through 2026 volumes, but from last year, we actually collected from 11 residence buildings across our portfolio, so 9 in Waterloo, 2 in Brantford, over 6 days. We collected over 9,000 pounds, 160 hours divided among staff, faculty, and student volunteers, and student staff as well. And 3,000 pounds entered the inventory management system of the Free Store. So we're super proud of this circularity that happens at a microcosm level, and we're excited to continue to have that happen. What we also wanted to share is that we're kind of applying this internal auditing capacity model to enhance existing programs or new programs that we want to initiate. So our athletics community, our athletics and recreation community, is looking to implement a multi-phase sustainability programming pilot. They initially started their pilot as a way to digitize their intramural sports registration and record keeping. So just stopping using paper and moving to the 21st century and using technology to actually do registration and kind of retention of information. They're also looking to identify sustainable food concession options and add more recycling and organics collection throughout the building portfolio that they have. And we were really proud of the fact that starting for 26-27, we received a $10,000 US sports arts campus challenge grant, which allows us to implement some of these new initiatives that athletics is leading. Our office is hoping to use effective waste auditing to confirm how these programs are going. We have some data from the original pilot for the digitization side, but we're hoping to utilize that moving forward. Kind of flipping things over, the Faculty of Science has pursued a My Green Lab certification as part of a pilot that has now turned into a long-term implementation program. So our Laurier laboratory portfolio across our multiple buildings are looking to utilize this framework that's based in the US that we've adopted here in Ontario to maximize our energy usage, our water usage, and our waste management footprint. For the waste management footprint, we were in practice here looking at our laboratory auditing. So I was participating in this audit with our team lead, Gina Braun, and their team was actually looking to look at diversion for recycling of pipettes, gloves, and glass alternatives, composting of paper towels, programs that we've historically either used in different bits and pieces, but haven't fully integrated as a full-scale program. The My Green Lab certification program gave us a framework to kind of build around, but the auditing and the data and the collection materials that are available, what Laura and Michelle had alluded to is that if you have information, you can actually create a capacity to really strengthen the program itself. So rather than enhancing and diving into the program further, we're actually looking to develop a long-term Made in Laurier strategy that we're going to customize for our laboratories here. And obviously that requires a lot of data. So we're going to be doing a lot of auditing after that. So from a horizon perspective, what I wanted to share is that the waste auditing capacity has really enhanced what we want to do next. We've spent 18 years plus getting to this point. We're looking to evolve our program on a continuous improvement basis. And what we're really excited about is that, for one thing, the athletics program led by Chad Van Dyke and his team, they're looking to do this implementation from athletics. We're looking to be one of the first schools in Ontario to fully integrate sustainability with athletics. I know that's popular in the US from the Green Sports Alliance side of things. Not a lot of schools in Ontario are adopting this type of practice. So we're looking to really strategically pursue that. The Made in Laurier Green Lab certification is a customization effort. So without internal auditing capacity, you wouldn't be able to really build this out. So it's an ambitious endeavor, but we're excited that that customization of a homegrown vision is actually something that's going to be really enhanced by auditing purposes. Our team lead looking at our long-term zero waste strategy, Kat Milicic, she's looking to align this with our new 2028-2033 action plan, which we're developing in real time right now. That long-term strategy will include integrated zero waste initiatives. It's a team of 3 that really can't do that on behalf of the 19,000 to 21,000 people that go to school here and work here and live here. We want that to be something that everybody embraces. So auditing and information and data gathering is going to be what enhances that for the future. And the long-term aspect of our teams that I mentioned at the beginning, instituting zero waste initiatives across the board. The fact that multiple departments and faculties now are starting to embrace this and get interested in it. As much as it took over 18 years, it doesn't mean that we can't continue to evolve the program over time. So we're excited at the fact that a lot of departments and faculties have actually reached out to us to want to engage on this topic. And I think auditing and waste auditing in general will actually allow us to continue to enhance that engagement side of things. And I'm going to pass it back over to the team to kind of facilitate some of the questions that may come. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Yes. Lots going on. I know, I recall from one of our earlier conversations, it's really a value point with using waste audits is just how do you build the story, the narrative that you can use within an institutional dynamic. So not just sort of the granular data for analytical purposes, but also to tell a narrative that you can use when you're talking to athletics, when you're talking to the different stakeholders for making the case for how to move or why there's a need to move programs forward also. Great. Laura, Michelle, if you want to turn in your cameras and join here and Sydney or Mackenzie, we can go ahead and turn off the slides for now and we'll pivot and have some question and discussion. One question I know that's came in for you, Eric, was from Blake. In moving away from paper to avoid paper waste, is there an inadvertent rise in the cost of e-waste? Is there potentially, impact by doing that sort of switch, moving to paperless?
That's a great question. The answer is technically yes, right? Like, so we're obviously going to be using more technology that to some extent is going to become obsolete in a few years' time. I think the institutional transition from an ICT, IT side of things, of utilizing digitized systems and digitized technology was always encouraged. We've already kind of moved on from having individual desktop printers and moving to centralized printing. As much as that sounds like an initiative that could have been done, 15, 20 years ago, we actually just did it about 3 years ago. And so these are the types of things that I think we're embracing that side of it because it is going to generate more e-waste, technically speaking. But I think the single-use paper aspect of things where things didn't need to be printed anymore. Things are people are using devices more for meetings and for in general. I think that's going to still be the long-term norm that we want to kind of facilitate and support.
Yeah, we're certainly it's the direction everywhere everybody's going, regardless. I had a couple of questions, Michelle and Laura, for both of you. One was from Rick, was asking about the value, going back to the Iowa statewide study. What do you, I guess the question is kind of what do you learn when you're doing something across a wide swath like that, where you have different types of communities, different types of waste streams and all? Where's the sort of the value and how does that help someone like the state of Iowa with its planning and how they use that data when it's not just sort of a single waste stream?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, the state has done, I believe, 3 or 4 of these studies. They typically do them every 4 or 5 years. So they've really been able to track trends in waste disposal so they can identify if the programs or policies they're implementing are, in fact impacting the disposed waste stream. And then the data is also not only looked at statewide, but also by the regions. So that the state is able to use the data to say, you know, in the northeast portion of the state, we've got a lot of paper or, you know, aluminum or something like that. So that again, those counties can modify or look to modify or add new programs to target specific materials.
Great. We also had a couple of questions just on the tech side of waste audits. One was from Annalisa. You referred to using an app for doing visual waste audits. I think was that one that what have you addressed?
I might have provided a written response, but yeah, we are looking for more and more ways that we can automate or add AI to help assist. I will say it's really hard to replace someone boots on the ground hand sorting material. Certainly you can do that in a MRF and add robotics, but when you're doing these one-time audits, that can be much more difficult. But our visual components, especially throughout California, with the annual requirement to conduct route reviews for a hauler and all of their routes, we have frequently used Zabel, which is an AI platform that when you're doing your visual audit and capturing a photo, it helps you identify potential contaminants within that waste stream and can help make that process a bit more efficient. It, of course, takes a person still utilizing your phone and being there at the bin, but that has been something that we've utilized, at least for visuals.
Yeah. Yeah. I know I've seen other companies, Zabel, you mentioned, Spirit is another one that has a similar platform. They've seen that.
Yeah, there's plenty of options out there, and I know they're up and coming too as we continue to move into like this AI bubble for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly the potential for technology is exciting just in general to help with data because that's always been a real challenge with the waste industry in general is trying to get metrics. But the fact that the ability to use some of these new platforms that are coming out and as they improve to lower the cost and make it easier to do these is a exciting potential.
Mhm.
Great. There was a question, Eric, again, coming back for you, a question here from, looks like you responded to this in the chat, but if you could just for everybody, just talking about the free store and how it's managed and what some of the challenges are that have been experienced with that.
Yeah. So it was a great question. It was for us, the free store is at 2 campus buildings. So we have a permanent free store, which is great in each building. It's managed by a combination of student staff, and staff leads. We're open about 6 hours a week during the fall and winter semesters. We usually close in the summer to do sorting. The biggest challenges is mainly the accessible locations. In our Brantford campus, it's actually in our main kind of student lounge area. So all the 3,000 plus students that go to that campus know where it is. In our Waterloo campus, which is where 19,000 students are, we have the challenge of it's kind of in the basement, tucked away. It was kind of an old storage location, and it's not necessarily a readily accessible student space, and only open 6 hours a week. Weekends, evenings. When students are more active, typically. We're not open during those times. And so a lot of it's through appointments, and that becomes kind of an arduous, archaic process in 2026. But I think the appreciated side of it is that, students not having an ability to pay for these things and then getting this full access to something that's free. What's really a positive has been, alumni have reached out, industry have reached out to want to sponsor, industry have reached out to want to donate. it's a small kind of capacity, but we're intrigued by the fact that, we kind of align with spring cleaning and fall cleaning for staff and faculty as well. Take your diverted items to work rather than throwing it away. These campaigns actually result in a lot of engagement. When I started, we used to also do concierge service. So I would actually go and pick up the materials directly from staff and faculty. And I got to meet staff and faculty as a result of that effort. I don't do it anymore. It's a lot of time commitment, but it's really fun to kind of get in the weeds of engaging the people who want to divert their materials directly, because it's an opportunity to talk to them about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Some questions coming back to methodology that directed to Michelle, Laura, but Eric, also feel free to jump in with this. But one from Mahina. Do you have recommendations for approximating weight compositions when conducting visual audits? So I'm guessing this might be going towards sort of the volume to weight conversion. Might be one way, but and then another one, are there standard conversion metrics for calculating waste diversion to volume? Two metrics like CO2 emissions, water saved, tree saved. I know the warm model is one way of doing this, but are there any other suggestions?
That's what we've used for those greenhouse gas emission reduction potential is the warm.
Yeah, and as far as the visual volume to weight conversion metrics, we are using the US EPA volume to weight conversions as well.
Okay. That's another area where I'll be curious to see, with this technology comes more into use, if there are opportunities to refine and come up with more sophisticated ways of doing that, because that's always traditionally been another sort of Achilles heel, is how we take something that with what a yard of a material is in one location to another could be loose at the best. Great. Just looking here for some.
I know there was a question on whether Iowa used their Swiffer grant money, and they did use that for the 2022 study. We also conducted statewide studies and a number of other states that also used their Swiffer grant money for those studies. Depending on the length of the studies, it's really all about time in the field. Somebody mentioned, they're very labor intensive. I think the Iowa study was somewhere around 300,000. I think we were in the field for 10 weeks, so a week at each facility. So the biggest part of those studies, again, being the labor. We use a variety of sources of labor for sorters. Some typically SCS will have a manager and a field supervisor out there. We may use local labor. We work with a number of small companies across the country that do this type of work and have people that are willing to come out and sort trash for 4, 5, 10 weeks at a time. Sometimes we do use temp labor, really depends on where we are. I think the problem sometimes is that somebody comes out and they sort trash for a day and they say, I am not coming back the next day. So we try to use companies, groups that we've worked with in the past that are used to doing this type of work and are committed to doing it. Eric, I know at some of the campuses that we've done work, we've actually recruited students sometimes, like you do, to help. Again, sometimes they'll come out and they won't show up the next day, but other times the students really enjoy, getting involved, and it's pretty eye-opening to see what is being thrown away, and those of us in this waste industry, find that to be pretty interesting most of the time.
Yeah. I, having worked for a university once upon a time, I was always intrigued. There are certain people who that's the last thing in the world they would ever want to do. And there's some people, including we use students, sometimes there's sort of a fascinating aspect to
Yeah,
it that it's wasn't that difficult to recruit volunteers in some
that's right.
cases. Um,
If I can add to that, Alec, to what Michelle said, is like I think the challenge with our students is that because we're so close to the greater Toronto area, which is where a good portion of our students attend from, they have different waste disposal and diversion standards in a municipality just 45 minutes away, and a cluster of municipalities that are around there, they're all different. And so when they come to our cities where our institutions are, it's also different. And so that kind of unified standard within the provincial programming becomes almost a barrier to do it correctly. And so when the students find that out firsthand or secondhand, it's almost a surprise, right? Because it's confusing for them. And so participating and learning about it is the only way they're really going to learn it. And unfortunately, even with signage and good programs, firsthand kind of participation is the only way they're going to actually immersively learn it, and auditing kind of validates that.
yeah. And then almost a little bit sort of ties in also to another question that Madison put in here, and I saw you'd responded to it directly, Eric, but from the University of Iowa, and just thoughts about using, having public waste audits where you could use that as an educational tool, both for the people, the students who might be doing it, but also as a sort of a public display. And I know that's something we did at the university I was at, where we would get permission to set up in the quad, and we would have a giant trash mountain with all the bags from the night beforehand set up on tarps. And that was its own display, so people could see this is how much we generated one day. But then over several hour period, we had volunteers doing the audit there on the quad during lunch, so that we could have sort of live updates, and we were sort of updating our numbers on poster boards by the end of the day, so that people could see this mountain was X% divertible and others. But certainly that's a whole nother area that waste audits could be used, is just giving you the narrative, that the data that helps you tell a narrative for both as I mentioned earlier, to stakeholders, decision makers, but also to as a public engagement tool. Yeah. I think with time, we'll call it here. We do have a few more questions. I'll work with our speakers to see if we can respond to some of these offline, but I want to take a few minutes to, if we can pull up the slide deck again, go over some closing points that I wanted to share. And first, it's just to reiterate what I'd mentioned earlier, that the recording, as well as the presentation slides, all the resources that I was dropping into the chat function, all of these will be posted onto our website in the next day or two, and we'll be sending out a link to anybody who registered for this program, so that you can access those or share with your colleagues. Also want to point out that I think this is our 4th year of this webinar series, and we've got a great archive of recordings and decks from past programs on a whole range of different topics. So just know, if you're interested in other subject areas related to waste reduction, I encourage you to check out our archive on the buschsystems.com website using that QR code there. Next slide. And then want to point out, we are going to take the July off, and then we're going to come back in August with our next program that's going to be focused specifically on airports, and working with all the different aspects of how you reduce waste in airports, from working with concessionaires to how we manage data and operations for effective diversion programs. So we haven't locked down the date yet, but I suspect probably it's going to be the latter half of the month, and we'll be sharing the announcement about those details and our speakers in the weeks to come. So if that's a topic of interest that you work with, or just curious to see how they do it at airports, keep an eye out for that program. Next. One last time, I want to thank all three of you, Laura, Michelle, Eric. Have your contact information here if folks want to reach out to you. Appreciate you taking the time to put together these presentations. Appreciate the great work that all of you are doing and sharing your knowledge today. And so thank you very much. Great. So with that, we're going to bring the program to an end. I do have one or two other housekeeping slides, I think. We'll be sending out a survey when this is done. Either when you log off from the program, you may see an automatic message pop up from Zoom, or look for an email the next day. We'd love to get your feedback, how the program went. Did it meet your expectations? Any feedback that you want to share with our speakers. We'll have 2 or 3 questions that you can fill out, so keep an eye out for that. And also want to point out if you are doing any sort of certificate program that this webinar might be eligible for, let us know. We're happy to provide a certificate of attendance that you could submit to that. So just reach out to my colleague Mackenzie Bradbury at the email that you see on the screen here. And finally, we're bringing this program to an end, but if we could bring my colleague Michelle Dunn up on the screen. Again, as I mentioned, Busch Systems, we manufacture and sell recycling and waste bins, so we've got a lot of great ones, and I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Michelle to tell us a little bit more about what we're doing there. So for those who want to stick around, great. Everybody else, thank you for joining us today. Michelle.
Thank you very much, Alec, and thank you again to our speakers, Laura, Michelle, and Eric, for a very, very informative webinar. My name is Michelle. I'm with Busch Systems, and I'm here with my colleague, Emily. Hello. I've been with Busch Systems for almost 17 years, and we are just celebrating our 41st year in business this year. So very exciting things ahead that we are coming out with. We are the manufacturer of waste and recycling containers, and we manufacture products with recycled plastic, recycled lumber, metal, melamine, plastic, along with stainless steel. Everything that we manufacture is made of recycled content. We are a B Corp corporation as well. We are certified, which really means using business for greater good. We hold ourselves at the highest standards when it comes to the environment, social. We're very accountable for our actions, right from start to finish in terms of the packaging and in the manufacturing process. So Emily and I are here today to really go over some of our most popular and most common centralized waste and recycling stations. Today's webinar obviously was about waste audit, so it's very, very important that you look at the types of containers that you have out, the signage, the colors, the streams, restrictive openings, all of that good stuff when putting your program in place to make your program the most effective as possible and increase those diversion rates. So with that being said,
as Michelle mentioned, proper waste and recycling containers play a key role in improving audit results and long-term waste diversion performance. When containers are clearly designed, correctly labeled, and strategically placed, they help make the right disposal choice at the point of use. This reduces contamination. One of the biggest issues identified during waste audits were recyclable and compostable materials that end up in the wrong stream. And just to, we recently started working with a very large organization. We've rolled out some recycling containers throughout all of their locations. And they've already started seeing upwards of a 30% reduction in waste, which is significant and amazing to hear. We're really excited about that. So I do want to talk to you about the Aristata, which is one of our containers. The one that's showcasing here is a triple stream, which has our restrictive openings for cans, bottles, paper, and waste. So one other great thing when we are designing things, we're also thinking about the people who have to service our bins. So this is ergonomically designed, sits on the top, makes it very easy to change the bag, goes back in, and it also has a sleek and beautiful design to it. Not only do we have indoor, but we also have outdoor containers. This is the Aura. It's one of our many selections for outdoor. This is made of recycled lumber. It does have a 36 gallon capacity with restricted openings and clear labeling to make it easy for those that are using it. Michelle?
now, just to go over one of our most popular containers, again, I've been with Busch Systems for 17 years, and this system has been in our lineup since the beginning that I've been here. We have made some tweaks and design changes over the course of time, listening to our users. However, I'm just going to wheel it over, or not. Okay, I'm gonna leave it back there. What you can see is the different color schemes. So in this particular lineup, we have the gray bodies along with a black one. We do have this in blue, black, gray, and green. So we do stock it in several different colors along with yellow as well. Lots of differences in terms of restrictive openings. This one here is for single stream, and it's an Excel size. So many of our systems that Emily talked about as well, including our indoor and our outdoor, they all come in different sizes. So we have an Excel version along with a regular standard version in both the Aristata and the outdoor Aspire line that she had gone over. This particular one, our waste watchers, do come in 6 different sizes, along with the back signage that you see at the back. It's very easy to click on and click off. You can customize everything as well. So we do have a very active marketing department here. All we would need is your signage in an AI or EPS file, and then we can simply do a mock-up to showcase what it would look like with your specific signage to your streams that you're collecting. That goes the same with the labels as well, which are just on the front here. So we can do anything from QR codes to Braille to color, you name it, it can be done. This lid here again for organics. I know Laura mentioned in when she was speaking, just the fact that they found so much organics in the waste stream. So it's really, really important to source separate and have that clear stream labeled organics or compost or however you name your stream. This one here is a lift lid, so it helps reduce smell and breathability. We do have it in a full lid as well. It just really depends on your program and then the lid type that you are looking for. This particular system and many of our systems as well can be connected, so it becomes more of a station. It comes in a single, a double, a triple, as Emily mentioned with our Aristata. This particular one is a triple. It does come in a single, double, triple, as well as a regular and the Excel size. And this one here is on dollies. So many of our systems you can get on casters, you can get on wheels as well. And that's just an additional accessory if that's something that works for your program. Now moving over to our Spectrum line, this one is actually made out of recycled metal. So we make several different options for the environment in terms of if you're in a manufacturing setting, if you're in a school setting, if you're in an office, hospitals, you name it, we pretty much have bins for everything. We have an extensive line of hundreds of products, and we have a very, very active R&D department as well. We've just launched a new outdoor line this week, along with a new liquid container last week. So we are always up and coming with new containers. We take a lot of recommendations and suggestions from our end users as well to create what is needed in today's environment, and you know what that next container would be, especially with AI and everything else that's changing so rapidly. So speaking of the Spectrum, it also comes in 6 different sizes, lots of different shapes. You can see the round one here. We just simply picked a few that we have in our showcase room to showcase the different colors that you can get, the labels on the front, along with the clear signage in the back. It's really, really important that you have the different restrictive openings along with the colors and your signage if you want to get the most out of your system and have, increased diversion rates. So this one here, just to showcase, is the cancer bottle. It comes in a circle. We do have a mixed opening for all of our containers. We have lift lids as well. So if you are looking for something to be closed or not to be seen, that is a possibility on most of our containers also. And the different add-ons, like I mentioned, with casters and signage and all of those good things. I'm not sure, Alec, if you're still there, or Mackenzie, if there's any questions at this point in terms of any of our systems that we've talked about today or just in general. Maybe not. I was just actually going to close off to say, even if you're not looking for our products, we are here to help. We have a number of different sales staff, and we're all in separate verticals. For example, Emily deals with manufacturing, she deals with healthcare. I'm a specialist in education, and we really, really hone in on our specialties so that we know what are the most popular containers that we're seeing, in the school systems today. and what are the struggles that people are faced with in hospitals and so on. We do have a lot of resources on our website. So again, if you're not looking for our products, but you're actually just looking for guidance or help in general, we are here to help. So we've got our webinars from Alex Passett. He's done case studies. Again, just resources, surveys that you can utilize to help with your program and make it a more successful one. So on that note, I'm hoping someone will step in to close it.
Hey, Michelle, I think we have some questions and we have some hands up. If people want to drop their questions in the chat, then I can read them out to Michelle and Emily, and they'll be happy to answer. We did have a few comments about custodial carts. So Amy mentioned that they're looking for a 3-bin system with waste recycling and organics. Have we considered making those or heard anything about that?
So we don't specialize in carts, I'll be very honest. We are able to suggest possible different companies that you could call or reach out to for those carts, depending on the size that you're looking for. I mean, we have a sister company as well that we've got some parts available to us, but they wouldn't be in that 3-stream that you're looking for. But I would definitely suggest, I'm hoping that Mackenzie, we can put at least my email and I can direct people to the right sales rep that would be able to help them out with exactly what they're looking for.
Amazing. Yes, we did just have a question about a product catalog. So we're going to have one of our colleagues drop that in the chat as well. And just checking out to see if there's anything else. Awesome. So the product catalog has been dropped. If there's, I'm not sure if there's any more questions, but I think we can close off, and then we'll also drop the emails in the chat so everybody can check those out as well if you want to contact Michelle or Emily with any questions. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining our program today. We hope you have a great afternoon, and we are going to close it out now. Make sure to copy Michelle and Emily's emails if you want to learn more about our product offerings, and have a great rest of your day.